Welcome to Clever Build DIY channel. In the previous video, it was about the installation of a metal frame of a 2-level plasterboard ceiling. In this video, we will consider the installation of a plasterboard ceiling with milled boxes for LED lighting. There are several ways to make boxes for LED strip, which we will now consider. The simplest method, which does not require milling, is to create a box for illumination from 2 sheets of gypsum board, where a metal guide is attached to the protruding bottom sheet of drywall to which the vertical part of the box is attached, made of a narrow piece of gypsum board. The advantages of this option are the speed and ease of manufacture. Cons: with the subsequent finishing of the outer corners of the box, to give straight lines and sharpness to the corners, you will need to install an aluminum corner profile, followed by repeated putty. The second version of the box, made by milling, also has its pros and cons. Let's start with the cons. For the manufacture of a ceiling box, you will need tools such as a handheld milling machine, and for its normal operation, you cannot do without unnecessary dust without a construction vacuum cleaner with a cyclone filter. You can watch my video about the manufacture of the simplest version of the cyclone by clicking on the link in the description of this video. Also, in the manufacture of elements from drywall using milling, accurate calculations and much more time are required. The undoubted advantage of milling is the even and sharp corners, so that the installation of corner elements is not required, and the application of putty is reduced to a minimum. You can learn more about the process of making boxes for LED backlighting from my other video, the link to which you will also find below in the description, or simply by subscribing to my channel. Installation of plasterboard on the ceiling. I begin by installing the back wall of the box, consisting of vertical pieces of plasterboard connecting the first and second levels of the ceiling. Before installing the segments along the perimeter of the formed niche, in the corners, and where the segments are connected to the ceiling, I remove the chamfer from the drywall. Putty will be laid in the chamfer. Further, I apply a primer to the central part of the ceiling of the first level and the rear walls of the box, seal the joints, putty, and cover it with water-based paint. More details about sealing joints and painting the ceiling can be seen in another video, a link to which I will also leave in the description of this video. The complete finishing of the first level niche located in the central part of the ceiling before the completion of the installation of the entire drywall is justified by the fact that after the installation of the boxes, it is normal to putty and paint the rear vertical wall of the box, and the part of the ceiling that it covers will not work, since access to this place will be closed by the box. Have a step from the inside, like the second layer of the protruding part. This step serves as a limiter when installing the box. Thanks to the step, during installation, it rested against the vertical rear wall of the box. In this connection, you can be sure that the box will be installed with the same protrusions on both sides. After finishing and painting the niche of the first level, I proceed to the installation of the second. I start with the installation of boxes for LED lighting. In my case, the box on each side is made of a solid sheet of gypsum board. After installing the niche boxes for lighting, I install the second boxes, a decorative niche, also made using milling. All joining of gypsum board sheets to each other is carried out only on a metal profile. In the case of joining sheets of gypsum board to each other with edges without a factory edge with wrapped paper, I cut off the mating edges of the gypsum board at an angle of 20 to 25 degrees. It should be noted that although the Knauf company recommend trimming the edges on a sheet that has not yet been screwed on, myself, I came to the conclusion that trimming the edges is much easier to do already on the bolted sheets, since the trimmed edges can interfere with the quality of pulling drywall with self-tapping screws. Since in these places, when screwing in a self-tapping screw, there is always a risk that the drywall will break at the edge. But when the sheets are already screwed to the ceiling, it is much easier to cut the edge, although of course there is also a minus here: work at height. As practice has shown, at the junction of two sheets of gypsum board, it is better not to connect the sheets close to each other and leave space between them to place the putty, since the subsequent sealing of the seam with the minimum width of the putty to be laid increases the possibility of cracking in this place. This is due to the fact that the putty for the joints, for example, the same Fugan from the Knauf company, has a decent shrinkage when dry, and with a minimum thickness of the putty seam, it turns out that there is nothing to shrink when drying, as a result of which cracks may appear. At the junction of the drywall with the wall, to the guide profile that is on the wall, I do not screw the drywall without special need. So, I gradually collect sealing puzzles, and fasten all sheets of drywall to the metal profile. I fasten the sheets first, with a small number of self-tapping screws, just to keep them on the ceiling. After installing all the drywall elements, I check, using the rule, whether all the sheets are in the same plane. If this is not the case, then the sheet can be removed and, having found the reason, eliminate it. It happens that a loose fit is hampered by only a few screws, hats, which protrude from the profile. After that, having installed all the drywall sheets in their places, I screw in the remaining self-tapping screws, which I let in with a step between each other of about 100 to 150 millimeters. I want to give a little advice: buy only high-quality black self-tapping screws for drywall, since low-quality and cheap self-tapping screws have a large percentage of defects. And a certain number of self-tapping screws simply fly into the trash can, as well as into the damaged drywall, since bad self-tapping screws can even not sit tightly in the screwdriver bit. It happens that such screws are not at all sharp, and this affects the speed and quality of work when screwing them in. Screwing in self-tapping screws, it is important that their cap does not break through the drywall paper, but presses it in. For this, I use a special bit with a nozzle, thanks to which the depth of screwing the screw into the drywall sheet is limited. After screwing in all the self-tapping screws, at the joints of sheets with a non-factory edge, using a wallpaper knife with replaceable blades, I chamfer at the joints. In the corners where the backlight boxes are joined, I also remove the chamfer so that the putty has a place to hold. After installing all the elements of the gypsum board and chamfering at the place where the sheets are joined, and this also applies to joining the sheet with the wall if it adjoins the edge and is not covered with paper, using a brush, I carefully priming the places on the sheets of gypsum board that are not covered with paper. Now the sealing is ready for the next stage, sealing the joints. Well, more on that in the next video. That's all. Do not forget to subscribe to my channel. Good luck to everyone and see you soon.